Karen Carpenter, along with her brother Richard Carpenter, sold millions of records.
For decades, fans have whispered about the mysterious dynamics behind Karen Carpenter's tragic life and career. Now, in a bombshell revelation, Karen's brother, Richard Carpenter, is setting the record straight. In a deeply emotional interview, he finally addresses the long-standing rumors that have haunted the Carpenter family for years. What secrets has he been holding back? What truth lies beneath the surface of their iconic musical legacy? Join us as we dive into this explosive confession and uncover the untold story of the Carpenters. A voice of gold, a life of quiet pain. Karen Ann Carpenter was an extraordinary American musician whose soft, emotional voice and quiet strength left an unforgettable mark on the world of music. Best known as one half of the famous sibling duo, the Carpenters, Karen worked alongside her older brother, Richard Carpenter, to create some of the most beloved pop ballads of the 1970s. With a voice that was both warm and haunting, Karen possessed a rare 3-octave contralto range, a gift that earned her admiration not just from fans, but also from fellow musicians and critics alike.
Pop singer Karen Carpenter is dead at the age of 32.
In 2010, decades after her passing, Rolling Stone honored her by placing her on its list of the 100 greatest singers of all time, a testament to her timeless appeal. Karen was born in New Haven, Connecticut, but her family relocated to Downey, California in 1963. It was there, in the heart of sunny California, that her musical talents truly began to blossom. During high school, she developed a passion for drumming, a skill that would initially define her role in the Carpenters. After graduation, she joined the choir at California State University, Long Beach, where she and Richard continued to explore their musical synergy. By 1969, the Carpenters had caught the attention of A&M Records, who signed them, setting in motion a remarkable journey of commercial success and critical acclaim. Their smooth, melodic sound stood out in a decade dominated by rock and rebellion. With songs like Close to You, We've Only Just Begun, and Rainy Days and Mondays, the Carpenters climbed the charts and captured hearts around the world. Karen, who originally performed mostly behind the drum kit, gradually became the face and voice of the group as producers and audiences began to favor seeing her center stage. Though she still contributed her drumming skills to certain tracks and live performances, her role evolved into that of the lead vocalist. However, behind Karen's soft smile and soothing voice lay a life shadowed by deep personal struggles. As the demands of fame grew heavier, so did the pressure to maintain a perfect image. By 1975, Karen began showing signs of anorexia nervosa, a condition that was not well understood at the time, especially outside of Hollywood's glittery walls. Her extreme weight loss and frail appearance concerned many, but very few knew how to help. Compounding this were emotional struggles, including complicated family expectations and the burden of constant public attention. Karen's battle with the bad eating habits would go on for years. Despite attempts at treatment, she was never able to fully recover. On February 4, 1983, just a month shy of her 33rd birthday,
Carpenter died today from a heart attack.
Karen Carpenter died from heart failure caused by complications related to anorexia. Her sudden death shocked fans and celebrities alike and brought global awareness to the dangers of bad eating habits. At a time when such conditions were rarely discussed openly, her passing marked a turning point in public understanding and medical research into anorexia and body image issues. Karen's story didn't end with her death. In the decades since, her life has been explored in documentaries, books, and films, each one reflecting on the immense talent and quiet pain that defined her short but meaningful life. Beyond the tragedy, she is remembered for her angelic voice, her pioneering presence as a female drummer in a male-dominated space, and her lasting impact on pop music. Karen Carpenter remains not just a voice from the past, but a symbol of beauty, vulnerability, and the importance of recognizing mental and emotional health behind the spotlight. How did the legendary vocalist begin her journey in life? Was she trained from childhood? Let's delve into the details of her early life. Family dynamics. Karen Carpenter's early years in New Haven, Connecticut, were deeply influenced by the complicated and often tense atmosphere within the Carpenter household. Born in 1950, Karen was the younger child of Agnes and Harold Carpenter, and from the very beginning, it was clear that her family revolved around her older brother, Richard. With his extraordinary musical gifts and early success, Richard quickly became the center of attention, leaving Karen feeling like she was living in someone else's shadow. Their mother, Agnes, made little effort to hide her favoritism. She doted on Richard, celebrating his every achievement, while Karen's accomplishments often went unnoticed. Even as a child, Karen sensed this imbalance. She wasn't just overlooked. She felt invisible in her own home. Despite being bright, charming, and full of energy, she struggled to measure up in her parents' eyes, especially her mother's. This unspoken competition for affection and approval would come to define much of her early emotional world. Karen's father, Harold, was a gentler presence. He was a quiet man with a deep love for music, and he tried to nurture both children's interests. But once Richard began showing remarkable talent on the piano at a very young age, the family's focus narrowed. Richard's potential was clear and dazzling, and their parents poured their hopes into him, encouraging him toward what they believed would be a brilliant future in music. Karen, on the other hand, didn't show much interest in music at first. Her passion lay elsewhere, in sports, particularly baseball, where she was not only enthusiastic, but also skilled. In fact, on the playground, she was often chosen before Richard for team games, and she was known for her competitive spirit and lively personality. Still, no matter how well she did outside the home, inside it, she remained in Richard's shadow. Over time, the constant comparisons began to wear on her. She wasn't untalented, far from it, but the early spotlight on her brother made it hard for her to feel confident in her own path. When she finally developed an interest in music, it wasn't in the dramatic, spotlight-stealing way that Richard had. Instead, her love for music came quietly, more like a personal discovery than a declaration. It was her voice that eventually stood out, warm, haunting, and emotionally rich. But even then, much of her journey was guided by Richard's direction and vision. The bond between Karen and Richard was close, but it was layered with complexity. Richard was not just a brother. He was also a mentor, a collaborator, and at times, an overwhelming influence in her life. Their professional partnership as the Carpenters brought them global fame, but it also magnified the dynamics of their childhood. Richard remained the musical architect, while Karen, even with her extraordinary voice, often played the role of the performer rather than the decision-maker. The emotional weight Karen carried from those early years, the need to be seen, the desire to prove herself, and the silent battle for her mother's affection, left deep marks on her self-image. As the demands of fame, performance, and perfection took their toll, those childhood insecurities didn't go away. They only grew stronger. The very same family dynamics that gave rise to her musical career also planted the seeds of the struggles that would later define her personal life. Looking back, it's clear that Karen's story wasn't just about music. It was about identity, worth, and the longing to be truly heard, not just on stage, but in her own family. Her life was a complex mix of beauty and pain, talent and longing, all shaped by the silent shadows of her upbringing. It is obvious that the vocalist had shown interest in music quite early. How did Karen get to into the spotlight. Let's delve into Karen's journey to fame. A journey to fame. Karen Carpenter's journey to fame wasn't a straight line. It was a winding path full of unexpected turns. Unlike her brother Richard, who knew from childhood that he wanted a career in music, Karen's dreams weren't always so clear. In fact, she didn't even discover her musical talent in the usual way. As a teenager, she joined her school's band, not because she wanted to be a musician, but simply to get out of gym class. It turned out to be a life-changing decision. What began as a way to dodge physical education soon blossomed into a deep love for playing the drums. And eventually, hidden behind the drum kit, her soft, pure singing voice began to shine through. By 1965, Richard had formed the Richard Carpenter Trio, and Karen was behind the drums, quietly but powerfully, keeping the beat. Their relationship as siblings wasn't always smooth. They had their fair share of arguments, especially when it came to creative direction. But together, their talent was undeniable. The trio quickly began to make a name for themselves in the local music scene, impressing crowds with their musical chemistry and unique sound. Still, it would take a few more years before their big break arrived. In 1969, everything changed when a demo tape of their music landed in the hands of Herb Alpert, a famous trumpeter and the co-founder of A&M Records. Alpert was instantly captivated, not by the instrumentation or Richard's arrangements, but by Karen's voice. There was something hauntingly beautiful about it, clear, calm, and effortlessly emotional. It cut through the noise of the industry and grabbed his attention. Alpert offered them a recording deal, and that same year, they released their first album, Offering. Unfortunately, it didn't make waves. Sales were low, and the album struggled to get attention. For many artists, this kind of early failure might have ended the journey right then and there. But Alpert saw something others didn't. He believed in them. He urged them to keep going, promising that their moment would come. That moment arrived with the release of Close to You. The gentle love song, guided by Karen's enchanting vocals and Richard's careful arrangement, struck a chord with listeners around the world. It climbed to the top of the Billboard charts and sold millions of copies. Suddenly, Karen and Richard Carpenter were no longer just talented siblings, they were stars. Following that breakthrough, the hits just kept coming. Songs like We've Only Just Begun, Rainy Days and Mondays, and Superstar made their way into the hearts of millions, becoming timeless classics. The Carpenters' sound was unlike anything else on the radio at the time, gentle, heartfelt, and deeply human. At the heart of it all was Karen's voice, which could express both joy and sorrow in the same breath. Despite her growing fame as a singer, Karen was modest. She preferred staying behind her drum set, letting Richard take the spotlight during interviews and performances. It wasn't about ego for her, it was about the music. But as their fame grew, fans and media alike began to demand more of Karen. They wanted to see the face behind the voice. Eventually, Richard gave in to the pressure and agreed that Karen should take center stage. It was a turning point. With Karen now front and center, the Carpenters became even more iconic. But behind the scenes, the story was far more complex, filled with challenges and sacrifices. Still, their rise to stardom remains one of the most fascinating and touching tales in music history, a story of hidden talent, quiet determination, and a voice that would never be forgotten. As they gradually rose to stardom, did they experience major setbacks and challenges? Let's find out. The dark side of fame. As the Carpenters rose to stardom in the 1970s, their soft harmonies and heartfelt lyrics captured the hearts of millions. But behind the scenes, a very different story was unfolding, one of fame, pressure, and silent suffering. At the center of it all was Karen Carpenter, whose voice touched the world, even as her own inner world began to unravel. Fame brought applause, awards, and adoration, but it also brought intense scrutiny. While Karen appeared graceful and confident under the spotlight, she was privately battling insecurities that would eventually consume her life. The turning point came after a magazine article commented on her appearance, describing her as chubby at 143 pounds. That single remark hit Karen deeply. It wasn't just a comment. It became a wound that never quite healed. Determined to lose weight, Karen started dieting. At first, the changes were noticeable but manageable. She dropped 11 pounds, and instead of concern, people showered her with compliments. The praise felt good. It made her feel in control, admired, even empowered. But beneath that praise was a dangerous message. Thinner meant better. And Karen, ever the perfectionist, took that message to heart. Her focus soon turned into an obsession. The need to be slimmer took over her thoughts. She began using unhealthy methods, hiding food, abusing laxatives, and restricting meals in secret. On stage, she sparkled. Off stage, she was disappearing, physically and emotionally. By 1974, her weight had plummeted to a fragile 99 pounds.
As their fame and popularity increased, so did the pressure on Karen Carpenter. She had always been a dieter, but being in the public eye took it to another level.
The change was so stark that rumors began swirling. Some suspected cancer, others whispered behind her back. But the truth was far more complex. Karen was struggling with anorexia nervosa, a serious eating habit that was barely understood at the time. In the 1970s, there were few conversations about eating habits, let alone widespread awareness or treatment options. People didn't know what to look for. And even if they did, few understood how deep the psychological roots ran. Karen's illness remained invisible to most, and even those closest to her often missed the warning signs. Meanwhile, her family life offered little relief. Her brother and musical partner, Richard Carpenter, was battling his own hidden war. Exhausted by the demands of fame, he had turned to prescription sedatives to manage chronic insomnia and the pressures of the spotlight. While the public saw a talented sibling duo delivering hit after hit, in reality, both Karen and Richard were quietly falling apart. Karen tried desperately to keep up appearances. She would wear layers of clothing during performances to hide her increasingly frail figure. To her fans, she remained the beautiful, sweet-voiced girl they had come to adore. Few realized the immense emotional and physical strain she was under. Despite her declining health, Karen pushed forward, recording, touring, smiling for cameras, all while battling a disorder that was slowly destroying her from the inside. Even in private, she tried to hide her pain. She didn't want to worry her family or admit that she was losing control. Her pride, perfectionism, and desire to meet expectations made it hard to ask for help. As the years passed, her condition worsened. But Karen kept telling herself, and others, that she was fine. The tragedy of Karen Carpenter's story lies not just in her illness, but in how unseen and misunderstood it was. She lived in a time when mental health and eating habits weren't openly discussed. Behind the applause and adoration was a young woman crying out for help in silence, a voice so pure and powerful, yet unable to speak for itself when it mattered most. Karen's story continues to echo as a haunting reminder of the dangers of image obsession, the hidden costs of fame, and the urgent need for compassion and awareness in matters of mental and emotional health. As the heavy weight of fame drew her back, Karen kept struggling with her private life. Let's dig further into the details of her tragic personal life in the middle of the fame. What a tragic life for Karen. In the early 1980s, Karen Carpenter's life took another heartbreaking turn, one that would further test her strength and push her closer to the edge. After enduring years of personal struggles and public pressure as a world-famous singer, Karen found herself swept up in what seemed like a hopeful new chapter. She met Thomas James Burris, a suave and successful real estate developer. Their romance moved quickly. In a matter of months, they were engaged, and for the first time in a long while,
Karen and Thomas Burris appeared very happy and very tired. And what are the immediate plans?
Karen believed she had finally found something real, someone to love, a sense of belonging, and the family life she had always longed for. To the outside world, it looked like a fairy tale. But just days before their wedding, the dream began to crumble. In a moment that would change everything, Burris admitted a devastating secret. He had undergone a vasectomy years earlier, making it impossible for him to have children. Karen, who had always dreamed of being a mother, was crushed. The revelation didn't just shock her, it broke her heart. What hurt even more was that he had hidden it from her until the very last minute. Karen considered calling off the wedding, but under intense pressure from her mother, who was determined to see her daughter married at all costs, she went through with it. That decision would haunt her. Almost immediately after their vows, the cracks in the marriage began to show. Burris, far from the picture-perfect husband he had seemed, turned out to be emotionally distant, financially irresponsible, and increasingly cruel. Unknown to Karen, he had been drowning in debt long before they met, and once married, he began using her money to fund his lifestyle. As if that betrayal wasn't enough, his behavior at home became more alarming. Karen endured not only emotional manipulation, but also physical abuse at his hands. The home she had hoped would be a sanctuary turned into yet another source of pain and fear. Feeling trapped and alone, Karen eventually found the courage to file for divorce. But by then, the damage had already cut deep. Her already fragile self-esteem, eroded over the years by the pressure of fame, her complicated relationship with food, and a lifelong struggle with body image, suffered a major blow. The disappointment of another failed relationship, especially one that held so much hope, left her feeling even more powerless. As she tried to make sense of her life, Karen channeled all her focus into the only thing she felt she could still control, her body. But this control was an illusion. Driven by a desperate need to be thin and acceptable in the eyes of others, Karen continued to rely on dangerous methods to lose weight. She used laxatives and thyroid medications, sometimes in alarming quantities, hoping to mold her body into something she believed was good enough. Yet the more she tried to tighten her grip, the more things slipped through her fingers. Her world, once filled with applause and admiration, was now shrinking into a silent battle with herself. Karen was caught in a downward spiral, trapped between the image she thought she needed to maintain and the emotional wound she never had the time or space to heal. What began as a search for love and belonging ended in betrayal and heartbreak, leaving behind scars that no one could see but that deeply shaped the final years of her life. Karen's story, so full of talent and tenderness, remains a haunting reminder of how fame, pressure, and unhealed pain can slowly erode even the brightest spirits. Let's dig further into the details of her illness and how it led to her tragic death. Karen Carpenter's battle with anorexia. Karen Carpenter, the golden voice behind the Carpenters, captivated millions with her soothing melodies and gentle smile. But behind the spotlight and sweet songs was a painful secret. Karen was fighting a silent, deadly battle with anorexia nervosa, an illness few understood at the time.
Carpenter was the victim of anorexia, a compulsion to diet which can lead to starvation. It's not known yet.
What began as a quiet desire to stay slim spiraled into a heartbreaking struggle that slowly consumed her. Her untimely death shocked fans worldwide and ripped the curtain off a hidden crisis. Karen's tragic story gave a name and face to eating habits, forcing the world to pay attention to the silent suffering so many endure. Karen's concern with her weight began while she was still in high school. Under medical advice, she initially followed the popular Stillman diet, which focused on high-protein, low-carbohydrate meals. For a time, it seemed harmless. She maintained a healthy weight of around 120 pounds and appeared happy, but fame brought new pressures. In 1973, after seeing an unflattering photo of herself during a concert, Karen grew anxious about her appearance. Determined to slim down, she hired a personal trainer, hoping to achieve a more delicate, slender look. Instead, the trainer's program focused on muscle building, which only made her feel bulkier. Frustrated, Karen took matters into her own hands. She began counting calories obsessively, eating less and less. Her weight dropped rapidly, first 20 pounds, and she continued to aim for more. By 1975, she had wasted away to a shocking 91 pounds. Her thin frame alarmed fans and friends alike. Although she smiled for the cameras and denied anything was wrong during interviews, those closest to her could see she was fading. Her once glowing presence had become ghostly. For years, Karen hid her pain, but by 1981, she could no longer keep up the facade. She opened up to her brother, Richard, admitting that she needed help. That year, she reached out to Cherry Boone, the daughter of singer Pat Boone, who had survived her own struggle with anorexia. Through Cherry, Karen began therapy with Stephen Levenkron, a psychotherapist in New York who specialized in eating habits. Despite entering treatment, Karen's health kept getting worse. In secret, she began using thyroid medication under a fake name to speed up her metabolism. She also turned to laxatives, reportedly taking as many as 90 pills each night. These harmful habits, driven by desperation and fear, only made her body weaker. Even with Levenkron's support, Karen continued to lose weight. At her lowest point, she weighed just 77 pounds. Her body was in crisis, but her mind couldn't let go of the need to be thinner. In September 1982, things took a turn. Karen was hospitalized and put on intravenous feeding. She gained 30 pounds quickly, but her heart, already strained from years of starvation and chemical abuse, wasn't ready for the sudden change. Though her physical appearance improved, the damage inside was deep. Later that year, Karen returned to California with a flicker of hope. She began working on new music, looked forward to the future, and even finalized her divorce. In December, she sang Christmas carols for children, her last performance. At her final public appearance in January 1983, she seemed upbeat and full of life. But tragically, the damage was irreversible. On February 4, 1983, just weeks after she appeared to be on the mend, Karen collapsed at her parents' home. She was rushed to the hospital, but it was too late. Her heart had failed. She was only 32 years old. Karen's funeral drew hundreds of mourners, stunned by the sudden loss of such a beloved star. An autopsy confirmed that her heart had been damaged by years of anorexia, worsened by the toxic effects of imetine, an ingredient found in ipecac syrup, which some suspected she had used. Her therapist denied this, but friends and family believed that her long-term use of laxatives and thyroid pills, especially during her unhappy marriage, had taken a deadly toll. Karen Carpenter's sudden death opened the world's eyes to a dangerous illness that had long been hidden in silence. Her story became a powerful wake-up call, bringing anorexia and other eating habits into public awareness. Her voice lives on, not just through her music, but through the important conversations her life and death continue to inspire. Let's take a dive into the legacy Karen left for the music world. A legacy of music and tragedy. Even while battling serious personal challenges behind the scenes, the Carpenters, America's cherished brother and sister duo of the 1970s, kept shining brightly in the music world. With Karen Carpenter's soft, soulful voice and Richard's musical brilliance, they created songs that touched the hearts of millions. Their smooth melodies and honest lyrics about love, loneliness, and life's little moments made people feel seen and understood. Albums like Now and Then and A Kind of Hush soared to the top of the charts, selling millions and winning fans across generations. Karen's voice, in particular, carried a haunting beauty that made each song unforgettable. Behind their fame was a deep sadness, especially for Karen, whose struggles were hidden behind the spotlight. Still, their music lived on, offering comfort and joy. Even decades later, their songs remain timeless, echoing a delicate blend of joy and sorrow that continues to move listeners around the world. But behind the glowing spotlight and soaring record sales, there was a hidden sadness that few could see. Karen Carpenter, despite her fame and adoring fans, was battling a personal demon, anorexia nervosa, a serious eating habit that was not widely understood at the time. Her struggle with body image and her desperate need for control in a world where everything else felt overwhelming quietly consumed her. As her illness worsened, her once radiant presence began to dim. By the mid-1970s, her weight had dropped dangerously low, and her physical health was clearly in decline. Those close to her grew more concerned as she became visibly frail, yet Karen continued to perform and record, pouring her pain into her music. By 1976, the Carpenters' dominance on the music charts had started to fade. The ever-changing trends in pop music, combined with Karen's failing health, made it difficult for the duo to maintain their previous momentum.
First of all, I'd like to thank all the members of NARIS and our producer, Jack Dougherty.
And Herb Alpert and Jerry Moss of A&M Records. Thank you very much.
Karen took a break from performing in hopes of recovery, but her condition only worsened. She sought treatment, including therapy and hospitalization, but the road to healing was long, and for Karen, ultimately incomplete before she eventually died in 1983. Karen's death was more than just the loss of a gifted artist. It was the silencing of a voice that had soothed and inspired millions. Her vocals were warm yet melancholic, delicate yet powerful, able to stir deep emotions with just a few notes. She had a way of making listeners feel seen, heard, and understood. That voice, so full of feeling, was now gone. And yet, Karen Carpenter's story did not end with her passing. Her legacy lives on through the music she left behind. Songs like Close to You, Rainy Days and Mondays, and We've Only Just Begun continue to play on radios and in hearts around the globe. But alongside her beautiful music is the lasting memory of her struggle, a haunting reminder of the pressures faced by those in the spotlight. Karen's life, full of beauty and talent, also carried pain and insecurity, reflecting the silent battles so many fight alone. Today, Karen Carpenter is remembered not only as a legendary singer, but also as a symbol of strength and vulnerability. Her story still resonates, especially with those who have faced issues of self-image, anxiety, or the intense demands of public life. She reminds us that behind the smiles and success, there can be silent cries for help, and that compassion, understanding, and mental health awareness are more important than ever. Though her time was short, Karen's impact was immense, and her voice continues to echo through generations, both in melody and in meaning. What do you think about Karen Carpenter's life, career, illness, and death? We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe.